I remember growing up watching professional wrestling as a kid. Not that kind, this kind. It took me a while to understand that professional wrestling wasn't just sport, but rather sports entertainment and big business. World Wrestling Entertainment, stock ticker WWE, is valued at more than $4 billion today. But that wasn't always the case. In its not too distant past, the company nearly went bankrupt, and scandals over steroid use threatened to crush the company before it even truly began. New scandals surrounding sexual allegations against the founder and then CEO Vince McMahon threatened the company once again.
New allegations have emerged involving WWE billionaire CEO Vince McMahon. The WWE board released a statement this morning that the company is looking into a potential $3 million hush money settlement over an alleged affair McMahon had with an employee.
So hold on to your seats as we venture into the business of professional wrestling and the rise and fall of WWE. WWE traces its roots back to 1953 when it was founded as Capital Wrestling Corporation by Vince McMahon Sr. The company underwent several name changes until being renamed the World Wrestling Federation, or WWF, in 1982. So when Vince McMahon Jr. acquired WWF from his father and his partners for $1 million, the expectation was that Vince would continue to promote WWF as a Northeast promotion. But little did they know, Vince had much different plans that would change the wrestling industry forever. In the early days, the professional wrestling market in the United States was fragmented across different regions and ruled by a governing body called the National Wrestling Alliance. Each region had their own promoter, and together they ruled as a cartel. The unspoken rule then was that promotions didn't expand outside their own regions. But Vince McMahon pulled away from the National Wrestling Alliance in 1983 and began to expand into other regions, in part through mergers and acquisitions, a strategy that he would continue to deploy over the history of the WWE. McMahon's growth plan in the 1980s included attracting top talent from competing promotions, including Hollywood Hulk Hogan. McMahon also brought on board Mr. T. I'm pitiful! Yeah, that guy. But the biggest challenge of Vince's life would come in 1985, when the fate of the company rested on one event: Wrestlemania. The first Wrestlemania was held at Madison Square Garden, hosting 9 wrestling matches, including wrestlers like Hulk Hogan, Rowdy Roddy Piper, and Mr. T. If it failed, it would have meant financial ruin and potential bankruptcy for the company. But in this case, fortune favored the bold and propelled professional wrestling into the mainstream. When all was said and done, over 1 million viewers tuned in to Wrestlemania on their TVs, making it the largest pay-per-view showing of a wrestling event in the United States at the time. Vince's early success reflected a deeper insight that is obvious today but was not well understood then. He knew then that wrestling wasn't just sport, but rather sports entertainment.
The hype leading up to the match is very carefully choreographed. Vince McMahon literally looks upon that hype the same way the producer of Dynasty or Dallas looks at his screenplay. They have one man who sits in a room year-round and writes scenarios 6 months in advance for what's going to happen leading up to these matches.
In the wrestling business, it's a question of 2 or more individuals going out to the ring, wrestling, having a little bit of applause or what have you from the audience, and it's time to go home until the next match. That's not really what we do. We're in the sports entertainment business. And there is a huge philosophical difference between being in strictly the wrestling business and being in the sports entertainment business as we are.
And throughout the company's history, he would continue to feature celebrities such as Cyndi Lauper in the 80s, Mike Tyson in the 90s, and even Donald Trump in the 2000s. WWF's path to the top didn't come without its obstacles. In 1988, multi-billionaire Ted Turner and founder of CNN, TNT, and TBS acquired what later became known as World Championship Wrestling, or WCW. WWF and WCW competed head-to-head, and we could only describe the feud as a match between David and Goliath.
This is not a monopoly deal. You've got competition out there for the players, for the arenas, and everything else. That's what it's supposed to be. Mr. McMahon wasn't entitled to a monopoly position in this wrestling game.
Ted, he's a son of a bitch.
But Vince McMahon wasn't the type to give up without a fight. WCW launched Monday Nitro on September 4th, 1995 to compete against WWF's Monday Night Raw. And in the mid-90s, the WWF seemed to be heading towards disaster. In 1997, WWF lost $6.5 million in a single year, which for a small company at the time was a massive setback. A few more years of that performance, and the WWF may have faded into obscurity. There could be only one winner, and WWF clearly needed a new direction. It needed a new attitude. In my mind, the Attitude Era for WWE is the defining period that allowed the company to be what it is today. It had to be. WWF was fighting for survival, and the thing about hard times is that sometimes unexpected things happen as a result. This era, from 1997 to 2001, brought edgier and more entertaining storytelling. During this era, we saw the rise of the rattlesnake Stone Cold Steve Austin. We also saw the rise of The Rock, who would later become an international superstar. It truly was a special time. And as a 9-year-old kid, it was exciting to see Stone Cold whoop some candy ass and crush some beers. And The Rock really is the most electrifying entertainer in the ring and on the big screen. Everything just seemed to click for WWF. And the Attitude Era is still regarded to this day as the most popular era in pro wrestling history. And the ratings started to reflect that. By April 1998, Monday Night Raw beat Nitro in the ratings for the first time in 2 years, and it continued to grow its lead over Nitro in the next 3 years. From a business perspective, higher ratings translated into more attractive sales contracts with TV networks. And from 1997 to 2001, annual income rose by more than $90 million. This sharp turnaround in performance is ultimately what positioned the company to do an IPO in the fall of 1999. Its performance helped it to raise $170 million at a valuation over $1.1 billion. At the end of the Attitude Era, after Vince McMahon body slammed Ted Turner in the ratings war, there was little for Ted Turner to do but admit defeat and sell the remnants of WCW to WWF. WWF acquired WCW for $4 million. And to give you perspective, this was only 5% of WWF's yearly earnings in 2001.
I own WCW.
Through this deal, the WWF secured its position as a top pro wrestling company in the world. the battle of the billionaires was over, and Vince McMahon was crowned the victor.
The very fate of WCW is in my hands.
But since the Attitude Era, ratings have declined due to changes in viewer behavior and changes in creative direction. This has caused the stock to trade sideways through the mid-2010s, although more recently it has benefited from heightened demand for content from TV networks and streaming services. The big reason why is that professional wrestling content is difficult to substitute because WWE literally acquired or outcompeted its most meaningful competition over the past 4 decades. It's like the MLB, NFL, or UFC, which benefit from scarcity value as premier sports leagues. The future for the WWE at this point is uncertain. The founder, Vince McMahon, was recently told, he stepped down as chairman and CEO on June 17, 2022, amid allegations of an affair with a former employee.
Did not respond to our request for comment on the alleged hush money settlement. But
it remains to be seen what impact this will have on the stock.
See the share price falling.
He is also the largest shareholder, owning about 80% of voting power, meaning that it's hard to see him fully stepping aside. So in my mind, corporate oversight and management is a big question mark for the company. Besides those company-specific issues, the content remains very valuable today. Its cash flows are also relatively recession-resistant, since much of its cash flows come from contracted revenue with media networks, as well as pent-up demand for live entertainment. The stock is definitely worth a look. But other similar stocks like EDR, the owner of the UFC, and FWONK, the owner of Formula One Racing, are also interesting stocks to consider that provide sports-related content. That's a wrap for now. You consider buying the stock. Why or why not? Also, body slam that like button if you watched until the end, and subscribe to stay up to date on all things business, investing, and entrepreneurship. See you in the next one, Wolfpack.